and I am appalled. Why is this on her favorite list, okay? Anybody who describes that as love and lust and longing, jail, criminal. I would be lying if I said this book didn't really change my views of Lana. Hi guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're not, welcome back. Today's video, we have a fun one. I'm doing something different I've never done before, which is reading the favorite books of a celebrity. Okay, I read Lana Del Rey's favorite books, and I'm gonna tell you what I think of her based off of her favorite books. In researching for this video, I found a list of her favorite books published by Far Out magazine. The list of favorite books has 12 books total, and I read 5 of them. So I didn't read all 12, but I read a good chunk, so I'm gonna be going through every single book I read, and hopefully we'll learn more about the insides of Miss Lana Del Rey. So the 12 books that were listed on the magazine article was Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Also, before I list all of them, I know I'm gonna pronounce these names wrong. Don't yell at me, okay? I'm trying my best. So, Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman, which is a poet. It's a book of poems. The Road to Paradise Island by Victoria Holt. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath, and Ariel by Sylvia Plath, which is a book of poems. Howl and Other Poems by Allen Ginsberg. The Master Key System by Charles F. Haanel. Forbidden Gates by Thomas Horn. Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dyer, Hollywood Babylon by Kenneth, and The Autobiography of a Yogi. Okay, 12 books. I'm not going to read all 12 of those books because, contrary to popular belief, I kind of have a life, just a little one. Off this list, I chose the 5 books that I thought would be like least teeth-pulling-esque. I hadn't read any of the books on this list prior to this video, so that's kind of cool, and a couple of them were on my want to read list, so kind of 2 birds with 1 stone moment. Okay, so the first book that I dove into is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Now, a little bit about Napoleon Hill. He's an American self-help author, okay? This is the book he's well known for. It was released in 1937, which means it's very, very old, okay? Like, very old. It's 2024. And we're taking our advice from a self-help book written in 1937. But, okay, keep going. Also, I'm not a self-help person. You'll probably catch on to that in this video, but I'm not a self-help person. I didn't think Lana was either, but whatever. So, it's really old. It's one of his best self-help selling books of all time, okay? Most of his books are promoted as like the principles to achieve success, which nowadays a book published with the promotion of principles to achieve success is usually just like a YouTuber or an old white guy telling you how you can also be rich, even though he has been rich his whole life. So it's that kind of vibe. But so I read the book cover to cover against my will because I'm not a self-help person, especially a self-help person for like financy bro book style books. So anyway, here are the takeaways that I got from this book, so you don't have to go read the book. To reach a goal, you must have a burning desire. Sound familiar? Believe that you will achieve your goal and knowing what you want. So you have to know what you want and you have to believe that you can achieve it. That kind of sounds like manifesting, because it is. It's literally manifesting. The other takeaway from this book is most people reach success past the point of failure. So like a lot of people who became billionaires were one step away from about to fail, right? Like they're gonna fail, they felt like they were gonna fail, or they failed, and instead of quitting, they kept going. So that's like the whole idea is keep going even if you're failing. Fail upwards, as they say. This book is essentially a finance bros version of How to Manifest, okay? It's a 1937 finance bro version of How to Manifest. So another key takeaway from this book is channeling your sexual energy into things that progress you towards your goal. So don't get distracted by this penetrating sexual energy that just wants to tell you to go have sex and get distracted and fall in love with someone. Ignore it. Channel all your sexual frustration into your goal. And the final kind of key point of this book was learn how to conquer your fears. Once you conquer, I think there's like 6 fears. Fear of poverty, criticism, illness, fear of loss, fear of being old, fear of death. And if you conquer all these fears, you achieve greatness. So there you go. Now you don't have to read the book. You're welcome. It's like 300 something pages. You're welcome. You're welcome, okay? It's old. It's old. I'm reading it. I'm like, this is so outdated. It's old. It's like, oh, this person became rich because of this in 1937. Okay, King, it's 2024. People become rich by shaking their ass in front of a camera. So I wouldn't be taking my advice from this book. But the fact that this is listed as one of Lana Del Rey's favorite books, for one, I'm not convinced. I don't think she read it. I think this book is one of those books where you're like, what's your favorite book? And everybody's automatic answer is Think and Grow Rich. Like, they've never read it. Or maybe they've read like a page or two. It's just like the go-to. And I urge you, if you are one of those people who says it's your favorite book, but you haven't read it, or maybe you've read 10 pages, actually read the whole book, because then you'll take it off your favorites list. Plus, I can't imagine Lana Del Rey reading a self-help book made by a man in 1937, but I don't know her. I have a parasocial relationship with her, so it could be her vibe. And if she actually did read it, it could make sense in the terms of, like, she is a manifestation girly. And we know this. She manifests. She's a manifester, so in that sense of, like, a spiritual manifest way, she might enjoy it if she actually read it. The next book that I read off her favorites list was Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov, which I know I'm butchering that and I don't care. But Lolita, you've heard of it, okay? You've heard of it. I've heard of it. It's everywhere. It's like an aesthetic right now. It's huge, and it's kind of made huge partly because of Lana Del Rey, but I never read the book. I just seen the cover in, like, people's aesthetic photos and stuff like that of, like, Lolita, this, like, baby doll, like, little girl style, having no clue what Lolita was until I read it for this video, and I'm appalled. Why is this on her favorite list, okay? A little bit about the author. From 1948 to 1959, the author was a professor of Russian literature at Cornell University, okay? His 1955 novel Lolita ranked 4th of Modern Library's list of the best 20th century novels, okay? This was in 2007. So it's considered one of the greatest works of the 20th century, which strongly disagree, but moving on. So what's this book about? Okay, I'm gonna read you the little blurb that's on the Goodreads because it enraged me. So I'm gonna explain it, but I'm gonna read the little blurb just so that you can get an idea of how this book is, like, marketed and looked at. If you're gonna pick it up, like, this is the blurb you read. So, Humbert, scholar, athlete, and romantic, has fallen completely and utterly in love with Dolores Hayes, his landlady's gum-snapping, silky-skinned 12-year-old daughter. Reluctantly agreeing to marry Mrs. Hayes just to be close to Lolita, Humbert suffers greatly in the pursuit of romance, and when Lo, herself, starts looking for attention elsewhere, he will carry her off in a desperate cross-country misadventure, all in the name of love. Hilarious, flamboyant, heartbreaking, and full of ingenious wordplay, Lolita is an immaculate, unforgettable masterpiece of obsession, delusion, and lust. Gag me, okay? Having romance, love, and lust to describe the relationship between this grown 30-something, 40-something-year-old man, pedo, okay, liking and literally taking a victim of a 12-year-old girl. Anybody who describes that as love and lust and longing, jail, criminal. Basically, this book is a memoir written by Humbert, who is rotting in a cell awaiting trial as he writes, okay? He ends up dying before the trial, but that's not really the point. Humbert marries a woman. Okay, so he takes lodge in this house and marries the woman he is living with because she has a 12-year-old daughter. Lolita, my Lolita, falls in love with her, which I do not believe in loving. I do not believe in loving. I don't think you can, that's not love. It's illness. Illness, babes. Illness. Seek help. He falls in love with the 12-year-old daughter. Essentially, her mom dies. Essentially, we're pretty sure he did it. Anyway, it's basically a diary of a pedophile, a disgusting man that just continuously justifies his actions. So, like, every couple chapters, he'll be like, well, this king from history this year actually married a 14-year-old. So, yeah. Actually, this well-known person from a lot of years ago married a 12-year-old. So, like, what I'm doing isn't even that bad. It's actually kind of normal for some people. So, I'm just, like, the minority. No. Also, there's a part, I want to say page, like, 95-ish, 100 maybe, where he's like, you're not going to believe me, but actually, she seduced me. Sir, that is a 12-year-old girl. Nice try, but no. Anyway, this book physically made me ill by page 12. Did I finish it? Yes, but I was like physically ill. Like I had to stop and walk away and come back because I just couldn't keep reading. It wouldn't be as bad if I didn't go at the end, if I didn't go to the Goodreads reviews and see 5-star reviews written by men that should literally put them behind bars. Like, I don't understand. I mean, I'm not surprised, but there are men walking around this world that read this book and was like, you know what? I kind of get where he's coming from. Don't believe me? Go read them. Actually, I'll give you a couple right now. This 5-star review made in 2017 says, thousands of Lolitas. Childhood for girls didn't used to be as protected as it is now in the West. And it still isn't, of course. For many girls in many countries in 2011, Humbert's crimes against Lolita would not be seen as crimes at all in many places. There are plenty of tour guides who will assist you if you want to be Humbert for a week or two in Vietnam or Cambodia. There's thousands of Lolitas out there, if that's your cup of tea. In the West, the Victorians invented childhood, and their earnest reformers tried and eventually succeeded in sweeping away the crowds of child prostitutes and the other things going on in London, as they did at the time of Samuel Johnson. Okay. Liberal Western culture has re-engineered the whole notion of childhood, but it's perpetually under attack. Okay, I'm sorry, but when you make a 5-star review for a book about pedophilia, and you basically say, well, actually, it's kind of like okay to do what he's doing in a couple countries at this year. If you want to, you could go do it right now. Which, literally, okay, Humbert. So just say you're Humbert. Just say that, like, that's it. Because every couple chapters, Humbert was justifying his actions kind of like this guy's doing right now. So, terrifying. Another one that really freaked me out. Not surprised, but not surprised. Not surprised, but severely disappointed in society of creepy men. Okay, so nymphette, nymphetiquette, nymphology, nymphism. I will never think of 12-year-old girls the same way. There's a stain on my brain. The power of this book is that it's creepy and taboo, but the pedophile incest is so damn plausible. Full stop. Plausible? Would you like to choose a different word? There's a criminal, upsetting proclivity of the subject matter, but the whole thing is oiled with reason. Say it ain't so. No, literally, say it ain't so. Literally delete your review. Literally, actually go check yourself in. Check yourself in, yes. Save us the time. Thank you. Yeah, and then the third one I'm going to read to you is, in Lolita, the protagonist is a criminal and his actions unforgivable. But, first of all, there's no but when we're talking about this content, okay? But he goes, but if there was any method to his madness, it would have been this. Then he proceeds to make 5 paragraphs, an essay, should you say, of why his actions are justified. Okay, there. It's one thing to like their writing style. I get it, okay? The writing style is good, I'm not gonna lie. It's another thing to justify the content of this book and the actions of this character. So, no. As far as Lana Del Rey saying this is one of her favorites, the writing style is really poetic. So I can see how she might like it for that. But she's also made many references in her music about relationships with older men, and specifically like Off to the Races, Lolita, Carmen, and This Is What Makes Us Girls. She refers to these relationships specifically referencing lines from like this novel and like themes from this novel. So she kind of misrepresents this novel as like a tragic forbidden love story, which if you haven't been listening, it's not. Okay, so it's not all on Lana. Can you hear? There's a lawnmower outside. I don't know if you can hear that, but we have to continue. The show must go on. Now, it's not Lana's fault that the book has been romanticized to the depth that it has been, but she's not entirely like out the problem. Okay, she is part of the problem. I think a lot of people have kind of just jumped on the Lolita aesthetic train. I know, like, I almost fell victim to it because I was like, oh, this is really cute, and I didn't like know, and I literally am like imagining maybe I can find it, but I'm imagining a specific TikTok of this girl being like Lolita core with like the cover of the book, and like her room like matches the aesthetic, which it was cute, but I'm like, did you read it? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think a lot of people are jumping on this train, this Lolita train, And you need to read the book, I think, before you jump on the train. So I've also heard the argument that people who've gone through something similarly traumatic kind of read it as like a, oh my god, like I can relate to this, and like that's fine, but the romanticization of it is where I draw the line, where I'm like, I don't really know if I like this. In conclusion of this book, if honestly anyone who flat out looks you in the face and goes, Lolita's my favorite book, electric chair. If a man on his dating profile says my favorite book is Lolita, run the other direction and do not look back. Okay, don't look back. You don't need him. I would be lying if I said this book didn't really change my views of Lana, because they kind of did. I finished this book and I was like, oh, I have like a bad taste in my mouth now, you know, like about her music and just this whole like romanticization of pedophilia, and I can't like unsee it. I don't know. So that's all I have to say about Lolita. So The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. A little bit about Sylvia Plath, which, mind you, I've had this book on my list for a while now to read it, and I just haven't got around to it. So when it came up for this video, I was like, okay. Honestly, I kind of thought Sylvia Plath was like overrated. I thought it was going to be kind of one of those things where everybody says she's amazing, and then I read it and I'm like, okay, well, you guys overhyped it a bit. It wasn't that good, but I was pleasantly surprised, okay? I actually loved this book. This is the first book out of this video that I loved. Chef's Kiss, 5-star. A little bit about Sylvia Plath. She's an American poet, novelist, and short story writer. Okay, she was awarded a Pulitzer Prize in Poetry in 1982. She was clinically depressed for most of her adult life and actually was treated multiple times with a earlier version of electromagnetic shock therapy. Electroconvulsive therapy, ECT. So like the okay, and she died by suicide in 1963. So, mentally ill vibes, okay? The Bell Jar, the book we're talking about, was originally published under the pseudonym Victoria Lucas in 1963, and I believe she did this because it's a semi-autobiography, so it's a lot of stories from like her life, but she's changed characters a bit to kind of be a little fictional in the sense of like blurring who's who, but she did it under another pseudonym because she was like, yikes, this is about like my mom and like my friends, so I don't really want my name attached to it. So the reason it's like a semi-autobiography is the protagonist in this book experiences mental illnesses that are literally parallel to Sylvia Plath's experience, with what may have been at the time clinical depression and bipolar 2, which I'm pretty sure bipolar 2 like hadn't been decided on yet at the time, but she was basically sad, y'all. Sad, mood swings, mentally ill, and she ended up dying by suicide a month after the United Kingdom publication of this book. So keep that in mind. The novel was published under Sylvia's name for the first time in 1967. So they did go back and was like, actually, let's publish it under her name, which, duh, because it's a Sylvia Plath. But it wasn't published in the United States until 1971. So there was a little bit of a delay. With that being said, the actual book, okay, is set in 1953, so the 50s. And we follow a character named Esther Greenwood. She's 19. She's an undergraduate student. From the suburbs of Boston, okay? She's awarded a summer internship, which is kind of how the book starts. She's in the internship, and she finds herself struggling with anxiety, dissociation. We get some fun, like, internship events that happen, but, like, through the eyes of someone who is just dissatisfied, and kind of like when you're, I don't know how to explain it, but like when you're excited about things, and then they happen, and you're like, oh, life still sucks. I'm still depressed. So it's kind of like that vibe. This intern ends. She returns to her Massachusetts home that she shared with her widowed mother. So her father's deceased. She's been she wanted to go to this like writing course over summer, but they ended up not taking her. Bummer. Kind of like starts to trigger this like, what am I gonna do? Because that was my plan this summer. Now I have nothing to do. Also, who I want to be. Also, what do I want to do for the rest of my life? So basically, what it feels like to be in your 20s, essentially, is this book. And especially this part. She goes, I'm gonna write a novel over summer. And then she starts writing and she's like, actually, I haven't lived. So why am I writing a novel? I'm like 19. I've never lived. I shouldn't be writing a novel, which, fair. I've done this several times. So she basically discovers that all her identity has been centered upon doing well academically, which, hi queen, I see you. I see you. Who else puts their identity around being academically? Amazing. And then when they graduated was like, oh, what is life for? Literally, what is life for? Because no one's grading me in life. I just have to like do things because I want to do them. Crazy. So anyway, she's unsure what she wants to do once she leaves school, and none of the choices that she's kind of being presented with are really appeal to her. She's like, okay, I'm over it. She increasingly becomes depressed. She can't sleep. She ends up seeing a psychiatrist, which gives her her first treatment of electroconvulsive therapy, and he basically traumatizes the F out of her because he's like crazy. I mean, he's not crazy, he's just a man in psychiatry at that time, okay? And at that time, it was crazy, okay? So afterwards, she's like, I'm not going back. She tells her mom, she's like, I'm not going back. Never again. That was terrifying and valid. The treatment doesn't work. Shocker. No pun intended. But it doesn't work, obviously, because he wasn't doing like a treatment. He was just like, here, let's just shock her really hard and then see if it fixes everything, which it didn't, obviously. She starts to make some half-hearted attempts at suicide, which none pan out until one attempt ends up being kind of really serious, and this lands her in a mental hospital, but she gets paired with Dr. Nolan, which is a female therapist, where she's never seen a female therapist before. Dr. Nolan starts giving her huge amounts of insulin, which to produce a reaction, which this method does not happen anymore, okay? It's disproven, but it was like the common psychiatric treatment at that time to do the insulin thing. So anyway, so she's getting these insulin treatments, and Dr. Nolan is like, oh, we're gonna do the shock therapy too. And then she's like, no, we're not. And Dr. Nolan's like, explain to me what happened at your other shock therapy. And she did, and the therapist was like, yeah, that's not how we do it. It's a lot nicer and less like traumatizing. So just bear with me. And she trusts her. She does the therapy. She does like 5 treatments, I think. And she's not like traumatized. It's a lot more of a relaxing experience. And it actually produces like an antidepressant effect on her. And she starts to get better. Yay! She starts to get better. And while she's there, Joanne Gilling, which is someone who did the internship with her in the beginning, or was a friend with her in the beginning. Anyway, she was in the beginning. She ends up landing in that mental hospital too. So, hi bestie, roomies. It's kind of like alluded to the fact that Joanne is a lesbian and likes Esther, but it's not really like flat out. She's not like, I'm a lesbian. It's just like kind of alluded to the fact. And Esther finds her very strange, and that's kind of like part of the illusion is Esther's like, okay. Anyway, so Esther tells Dr. Nolan she envies the freedom that men have. They can just go sleep with whoever they want. They don't have to worry about like purity and virginity. Dr. Nolan tells her, go get a diaphragm. She does. She loses her virginity. Yay. Turns out she's like 1 in a million who hemorrhages after losing their virginity. So she ends up having to go to the doctor, whatever. So she gets treated. Anyway, that's just like a little part. But anyway, that doesn't matter. The novel ends with Esther going into a interview conference with her team of treatment doctors. And they're about to determine whether or not she can leave the treatment facility. Bookends, okay? I'm a hater, and you guys know that, which is why I haven't read Sylvia Plath before this video. I was just convinced that she was going to be overhyped, but as a chronically sad 20-something-year-old girl, I ate this book up, okay? I loved it. Every part of it, loved this book. Related to it, loved it. Felt seen. Honestly, this is like the first book I read where I was like, oh, I actually like, I understand this character. Do you know what I mean? Like most books, they just don't get it. And I feel like the perspective is so good. And I think it's because it's off her own perspective. It's not like a fictional character she cooked up, even though Esther is a fictional character, but it's very based off of her real life experience. So it's kind of like, it's cool to read a book and be like, that is real. That's real. You know what I mean? Anyway, as for Lana Del Rey, I've already kind of categorized her music as sad girl music. So this book being one of her favorites actually makes a lot of sense to me. And a lot of her music has this like melancholy layer to it, similar to this book. Not necessarily like a depressed layer, but like a longing for happiness, or like longing for this happiness feeling we're supposed to have and we're supposed to be chasing. That's kind of what her music says to me. So it makes sense. And I think this is a key, I think it's a good favorite book, okay? So the next favorite book on the list that I read was Ariel, also by Sylvia Plath. This one's a collection of poems. It's not a novel, and I didn't read every single poem. Ariel was the second book of Sylvia Plath's poetry to be published. The work's editor, which is Ted Hughes, which is her husband, made substantial changes to her like intended plan. He added sections, he moved the poems around. So it's not like exactly how she wanted it. In 2004, a new edition was published the way that she wanted it to be published. So there are about 43 poems of them, and they all kind of date, I want to say, the last few weeks of her life. So it's kind of crazy. I didn't get to read every single poem, but I did read like 5 of them. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't really find any of them life altering. But with that being said, I'm not really a poetry person. I've yet to find a poem that kind of like speaks to me or like moves me in the way that poetry moves people. So I have a hard time inferring like meaning from poems and like lessons from poems. I think it honestly stems from like I got all those questions wrong on comprehension exams in school, where they were like, read the poem and what's the theme and what can you infer from the poem. I always got those questions wrong because I take everything so literally. It's really hard for me to read a poem and be like, oh, it's talking about this. Like, I read the poem and I'm like, it's talking about exactly what the words say. Do you know what I mean? It's really hard for me. So my brain just like shuts off when I read poetry. It's not good. I don't draw anything from it. As for Lana liking this, her music is like poetry. So again, sad, depressing. All these poems had a similar kind of bell jar vibe of just sad, depressing, mentally ill. So same vibe. Lana Del Rey is a sad girl, essentially, is what we're saying, but we kind of already knew that. So it's cool to see her favorite books kind of depict that, though. And the last book that I read is the Howl and Other Poems by Allen Ginsberg. So this is another collection of poems. Lana's a poetry girly through and through. Allen Ginsberg is an American poet and writer. He vigorously opposed military, economic materialism, sexual repression. He embodied very aspects of like counterculture and his views on drugs, sex. So he was kind of like anti-capitalism, anti-conformity, very like sex, drugs, and love, okay? So, and he was Buddhist who extensively studied Eastern religious disciplines. So this kind of does connect to her other books on the list that I didn't read, which were very like spiritualist, manifest, Buddhism kind of like vibe. This book specifically was published in 1956. It contains his most famous poem, Howl. It's considered to be one of the principal works of the Beat Generation, which if you don't know what the Beat Generation is, it's like a literary subculture movement started by a group of authors whose work kind of like influenced American culture and politics post World War II. So the bulk of their work was kind of like published and popularized in the 1950s. But the central elements of beat culture is the same kind of elements that the author has, like anti-capitalism, experimentation with psychological drugs, sexual liberation, exploration. So it's kind of giving like 70s vibes, but in the 50s, if that makes sense. I read the poem America. And again, I think I just don't understand poetry. So take my review with a grain of salt. But there's a distinct difference between these poems and the Sylvia poems in Ariel. These poems kind of focus more on like politics and war and policy and kind of things than Sylvia's kind of focuses on mental health and depression. I also read A Supermarket in California, which is just a poem about other poets. I don't know. I'm not a fan. I think if I were to choose between Alan's work and Sylvia's work as like, what did I like more? I would choose Sylvia's, but I could just be because like I'm a girl's girl and like I just like connect with girls more. I don't know. I would say I like Sylvia's work more. But the fact that this is one of Lana Del Rey's favorite books is kind of interesting to me because it's so different from her other favorites. But I can also kind of draw a connection to her like Americana kind of aesthetic and her whole thing she has going on, so I can kind of see it. And after discovering that the author of these poems is Buddhist, so it kind of connects with her like spiritualistic kind of view on things and her other spiritualistic books. So there is like a connection. It just takes on more of like a war politics lens. If anything, this collection of poems just kind of made me envious of people like Lana who can understand poetry. That is the last book I read of Lana Del Rey's favorite books. If you want to read them, go for it. But there are like, I think 7 other books I didn't read that were on that list. So read them if you want. I'm a huge Lana fan, so I wanted to do one of these like reading a celebrity's favorite books videos, but I wanted to do it on someone that I genuinely liked. I liked her music, so I'm a Lana stan, okay? So I was like, I want to see the inside of Lana's mind, and hopefully that's kind of what we did here. I definitely feel like I have a little more understanding of her music, and a little more understanding of like where her head's at, if that makes any sense. But other than that, thank you for watching. If you like this video, subscribe to my channel. If I should make another one of these videos, let me know whose favorite books I should read, okay? Like this video if you want. Follow me on Instagram if you want. Other than that, I will see you in the next video. Bye.